Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, anytime you get to watch this. This is your brother and friend Jojo. Let me tell you some of the reasons why Africa isn't making certain strides. It's amazing. It's so crazy. I believe that democracy is good. Would you believe if I tell you that some of the African countries are literally against others when it comes to development? And the question will be, why is it like this? Because is it ingrained in us? Is it brainwashed? Have we been brainwashed to the extent that we can't literally see that our fellow Africans are suffering and have some compassion as to how do we do this? Now, some people are brainwashed to the extent that they don't even know when they are working for the slave masters. They can't tell. Because now, tell me the reason why a country like Burkina Faso, that development has been stagnant, development has not been good enough. And just when they seem to be making certain strides, in as much as you may not agree with army taking position, but it's not all the army that bring the country down. No, that is not what we are experiencing, especially in Burkina Faso. So it was heartbreaking to hear this senator say this about Burkina Faso.
Mr. Speaker, anyway, on a more serious note, there is something else, Senator Ledama, you need to check. You know, I followed, you said something that got my attention about Captain Ibrahim Traore. I used to also fall for his hype, like many people fall on TikTok. I saw another journalist another time saying, oh, did you see the way he was cheered when he arrived for the inauguration of the Ghanaian new president, Mr. Speaker? And I was excited like most people, until I did some further research about what is exactly going on in Burkina Faso. And I want to challenge Senator Ledama to do the same, perhaps counter-check Senator Ledama, the things that you read online and the reality on ground, as Kenyans say. And I was shocked actually to learn that despite all this hype and the things that we read about, the things that they are doing, you know, first of all, I am not a fan of coups. I am a firm believer in democracy. I strongly believe that if there were lesser coups in Africa and more transitions by the ballot, Africa will advance better than it is doing through coups and by the power of the bullet. For that reason, I am not a big fan of that particular gentleman. But more importantly, the reason why the military, led by him, took over Burkina Faso is that they insisted that there were challenges with security in their country, and there were terrorists ravaging around, killing people, and all these kind of challenges. You need to check Senator Ledama, because from the research that I did, is that actually since they took over power, and you know wars are very costly. You can see what is happening to the gentleman in Ukraine. See how he's being embarrassed and the things that he's being taught, because wars are extremely expensive. If you don't have a way through which you will fund your war, then you better not start it. So the unfortunate situation in that country, and we need to check, unfortunately they are not part of the Great Lakes, but this is just to make the point that we need to understand our continent better, is that since coming into power by the bullet of Captain Ibrahim Traore, they have lost 40% more territory to the terrorists that were ravaging people. So it's easy to read all these things online, TikTok, and people say, oh, certain things are happening. But do your research further. And that's the tragedy with Africa. That is part of what this report is telling us, that as parliamentarians, Mr. Speaker, in African nations, we know very little about our continent. Of course, the issue that you further raised, Senator Ledama, which is extremely important, is the challenges of travel within this continent. You remember, in 2023, President William Ruto flagged off outside here, just next to Parliament at KICC, the first consignment of goods that were supposed to be sold from Kenya into the rest of the African countries under the ACFTA arrangement, Mr. Speaker. It took 3 months for those goods to get from Nairobi to Accra, Ghana, because of the challenges of logistics, border points, areas where there are conflict, poor road network and infrastructure, Mr. Speaker. Very serious challenges that this continent is facing, Mr. Speaker, which, unless we as the leaders we that serve in parliament, almost all our governments and institutions on the continent, Mr. Speaker, have their budgets drawn in their parliaments. And we must consciously begin to make decisions that further make our countries more competitive. We must think beyond, Mr. Speaker, just passing division of revenue.
Welcome back. He made certain utterances that I believe we need to look into. Africa lacks infrastructure. The infrastructural deficit is crazy. We get it. We had good plans and good projections into the future, but these things can never materialize if certain infrastructural deficits are not taken care of. I get it. To have goods traveled from Kenya to Ghana to take that length of time to get there, I mean, obviously it's not good for business. That is to say that we need to work hand in hand. But when you go on to say I'm against it because you are a democratically elected senator, and look, let's face reality. Once again, if we look at what is happening in Burkina Faso, we can attest to it that there is a lot of progress that this young man has brought to the country. Factories, monetary policies, security, we could say yes, the country was suffering from insurgency. We get it. It is still ongoing. We get it. But Senator, certain data that you presented isn't correct. One of them is the region that the insurgents or the terrorists have taken. It's not 40%. It's less than 40%. I think you should check that and put it into right perspective. When you put that one aside, you don't agree with Traore because you don't find yourself in Burkina Faso's shoes. Instead of an African country from the eastern side trying to come up to say, how do we help our brother in the western side? That seems to be going through this. You are rather sitting there and you throwing shade. You believe in democracy. So obviously, if we look at it, I believe that each and every country should look at its needs, carve out its own kind of democracy that will address its needs. And sometimes carving out some of these personalized democracy kind of, there will be a little bit, some elements in it that certain people from certain parts of certain people coming from the other side of democracy may not agree with it. But at the end of the day, each and every nation seems to have peculiar issues. African issues, we need to develop our own solutions. You agree with me that, for instance, the way democracy works in Britain is different from how democracy works in America. It's different from how democracy works in Germany. These three countries that I just mentioned, they all have ways and means. It's called democracy. It's called let's jojo. It's called let us share ideas. But they have come together and they looked at their individual countries and then they say, this is our need and this is how we're going to go about it. Until then, if a country is doing brilliant, and we all have to come together to support and to make sure that that country is able to make strides, we should, rather than criticizing them and saying I'm not for it. So what are we talking about? We're talking about, yes, there are issues. Yes, we are not running away from it. There are solutions that we may have to come up with. It's not going to be one size fits all. So Kenya, if you've been able to come, and even you talking about you don't believe in military coup and stuff like that, but not long ago, your country Gen Zs literally got your tail your tail in between your thighs. You guys were running away from them. You understand? Because of how you have ruled your country. Your reputation is not that good, you know. You are not like the yardstick. We can't use you as a yardstick. Do you think democracy is well and truly working very well in Kenya? Do you think democracy is working pretty well in Ghana? Do you think it's working so well in Nigeria? Do you think it's working so well in Namibia? They all will have their peculiar problems because geographically, we all have certain ways that we look at things. Culturally, we may have certain things in common, but the intricacies are not the same. So it feels so terrible. Let us watch this video of a gentleman explaining as to reasons why countries are supposed to carve out their own kind of democracy to help their country develop and grow.
What ideas could we, or do you think China could export globally?
Well, I don't think China has the truth truth is always relative. Some truth works for you, but it may not work for others. I think from the Chinese perspective, several things really are very important. One is that without democracy, there will be no modernization. So China does not oppose democracy. China advocates democracy. But then on the other hand, democracy has no set model. You need to adapt the democracy to your own national circumstances and come up with your own unique system. Now, secondly, we hear a lot about human rights. Human rights are so important, but I think from the Chinese perspective, human rights do not exist in a vacuum. Human rights need to be balanced with human obligations. You cannot talk about human rights without equally talking about human obligations. Therefore, I think the Chinese perspective is more balanced, is more all-inclusive, rather than one-sided. For example, in this August hall, I cannot cry fire. That's not an exercise of my freedom of speech. It's actually a violation of law if my cry results in stampede, for example. Therefore, I think when we talk about all these things, we need to be very careful as to what these labels really mean. Very quickly, the United Kingdom for many hundred years didn't have a Supreme Court. The EU, during its periodic review, found that deficiency, and EU ordered the United Kingdom to set up the Supreme Court. That's why if you go to London, go to the Westminster Square, on the west side of the square, there is a Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. Why? Because United Kingdom built the empire, declined from the empire without a Supreme Court, while Britain had always talked about the balance of power. We need to really know what all these labels are really about and whether you are really delivering and walking the walk while you talk the talk. I think we all need to find a way to serve the fundamental interest of our own people rather than being lectured upon by others and having other values being imposed on our own country. Thank you.
Welcome back. I don't really want to stress much in talking about the things that the gentleman just spoke about, because you and I could understand exactly what he was talking about. So I don't need to reiterate things. But let us put two and two together. Let us come together and see how best we can help ourselves as individual countries, help others develop and become better where they are lacking, and where it is that their strengths are. How best do we learn? Let's form the synergy. Let us form the bond, and let us do things the way it ought to be done. But if we're going to be going about just criticizing for the sake of criticizing, let us highlight things that needs to be worked on. Africa's own issues belongs to Africa, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who's coming from the west, it doesn't matter who's coming from the east. They don't understand us. They don't know what we're dealing with. We are supposed to come up and underline factors and underline things that are affecting us, and then let us go over there and say, these are the things that we seem to be going through. These are the homegrown solutions for this, but this is what we need. In spite of we needing this is what we have. This is what we bring to the table as well. That is when you are making progress, not when you stand in a Senate and be throwing things like, I'm not a fan of it. We're not saying be fan of it. We're saying support a worthy cause. We're saying bring up your idea and let us see how best we can bring this country out of the trenches that it finds itself in, not by means of you just criticizing. Senator, I'm disappointed in you, and I think you should look into things, and next time make the right and appropriate statements on the floor of Parliament and take things seriously. The people of Burkina Faso are not very happy with the things that are happening, but yet they are fighting it on their own. But then we can sit down there and say, oh, but I understand, because my man is saying he's done research. Did research in which language? Did research with which data? Where did he get his data from? If you look at it, it's the West that is provided these data. How real is the data that this senator used to do his research, that he's admonishing his fellow senator to do same as he has done? Where did you get the data from? So, Mr. Senator, as I said, we are kind of disappointed in you as Africans. We, the Pan-Africanists, we are disappointed in you. And we will continue to stride. We will continue to do the right thing. We will continue to jojo to make sure that Burkina Faso comes out of the trenches. Africa wears the cloth that it's supposed to wear. By the end of the day, as I keep on saying, Jojo here, what do I know? But still, it's my take.